Hello, my name is Paula Guastavino. I'm here at Station F with Fabrizio Nastri, founder and CEO of FlexUp. Welcome, Fabrizio.
Thank you for having me, Paula. Thank you so much.
Fabrizio has been building FlexUp, and we're here today to ask him a little bit what has been underneath FlexUp, what has been before in his head forming the whole idea and the whole concept that now is FlexUp. So,
Okay, that's a big question. So, when I started my career, I immediately went into large corporations like Shell and Boston Consulting Group and ArcelorMittal, very large organizations. And there I could see that there were different people in the organization that had very different incentives. So I could already see that there was a distortion and internal conflicts when a plant manager is paid based on how many tons of steel he produces, and the business unit manager is paid, has a bonus on the basis of the profitability of the business unit, like the EBITDA. But then the top managers, what they care about is the share price and the dividends. And then the employees down at the bottom, they just look at their own individual performance or the performance of their little teams. So there's a great disconnect in the incentives of different people within an organization. That's kind of the first thing that I could see when I was working the corporate life. Then, of course, I've been an entrepreneur many times, and the first thing I saw is the complexity of starting a business, the paperwork. Initially, you have an avalanche of administrative things that you need to deal with that you've never heard about, that is taking a lot of your time. And then you always realize that you were supposed to do something, you haven't done it, so maybe there's going to be a fine, or you have to do some extra procedure to fix what you should have done that you didn't know you had to do. For example, when I created some subsidiaries in Africa, I just created a subsidiary and then I sent some money to start funding the company. And then some guy shows up 6 months later and says, oh, you didn't declare to this agency that you were investing in a company here. And they say, oh, well, I didn't know we had to do this. We don't need to do this in France. Oh, well, you haven't done it, like it's going to be so many penalties.
Oh no.
So the complexity of starting a business when you're an entrepreneur and your expertise is in the business you're working on, but it's not in how to administer, structure, and run a company, right?
Right,
and so when you start a business, you need to be an expert both in your specific business field, but also in how to manage a company. And the second part has no value added. It's just taking a huge amount of time.
Right.
So that, yeah. Sorry, I have so many things to say, but so the third thing that really I felt was very hard as an entrepreneur is that you really feel that you're alone and you're fighting with everybody else. So you need to you need to pay your employees, you need to pay your suppliers, you need to get your clients to pay you, and then you have to convince investors to put money in your company. And once they give you the money, then they expect you to generate profits and pay dividends. But once they give you the money, they're not helping you actually on a day-to-day basis. They're just breathing down your neck to ask you why you're not delivering on the expected projections. So there's pressure on all sides, and you feel like there's nobody who's on your side.
Right, like there's no a team spirit. Like everyone is looking after themselves. Like there are not alignment.
Interest, that is the issue. So you can have a great team spirit, everybody's nice, but one of my first companies, when we faced difficulties, then suddenly people just turned their jacket around. We were best friends, and now one of my employee, literally, she was like one of my closest employee. I actually named her deputy general manager, So now, instead of being a simple employee, she had an official mandate as a director of the company. And under French law, if you're a director and you're fired or you lose your job, you don't get compensation benefits. You don't get unemployment anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So when we had to restructure the company and we did a voluntary severance package,
Mm-hmm.
there was a form I needed to fill, and then there was a checkbox. Is this person a director? And the truth was yes. And then she said, if you check that box, I'm gonna pull out the war axe. And then we're like, okay, so you see, like, it's a nice person. We had a great relationship, but now that the interests, financial interests, are not aligned,
Right.
that person will switch from being my friend to being my enemy. And she said it like super violently. And I went like, wow, this is it. I thought it's not that she's a bad person. It's just that the system is pushing her to now act in her interest against the interest of the company.
Precisely. So I see that you face many different situations, moments, but there were one or two in particular that was the deal breaker, the turning point where you say, okay, there has to be something different. Like
When when my second startup went bankrupt, Canopy,
mm-hmm.
I had been managing this company for 8 years. I co-founded it with a friend, whom after a few years decided to leave because he saw that this was not taking off as fast as he expected, and he had better opportunities elsewhere. So he walked away, and he immediately sued me, asking me to buy out his shares. The company was almost bankrupt. I put 800,000 euros in fresh cash to keep the company alive. I actually invested this money on a reasonably high valuation, 2 million euros pre-money valuation, considering the company was almost bankrupt. This was actually very nice for all the existing shareholders, otherwise it would have been diluted. So he actually sued me, asking me to buy out his shares. It was crazy. So then I managed a company alone for another couple of years. We expanded to Africa. We opened several subsidiaries. Then, of course, the business environment there is very promising. So you can make a lot of money very easily if you do things well. But then as soon as you start making a lot of money, then there's a lot of pressure or jealousy or problems that pop up. Eventually, we went bankrupt because one of the governments did not pay us for a contract we did. And then after 8 years, the company went bankrupt. And then I said, okay, I'm going to take a sabbatical, and I'm just going to sit down and think about, how can we do this differently? That was a real moment.
Right.
When Canopy went bankrupt, I thought to myself, there's got to be another way. It's just crazy that the whole world of business is going through all of this complexity and all these conflicts that turn people against each other when there's no reason. I mean, most people are nice.
I understand that it's there when you saw that there was not like the surface, there was like underneath the system, underneath like the whole structure that you were currently living through. So
Yeah, so the first company that I created initially was called COSYS, Collaborative System Design. And my intuition is, the current economic system is the result of centuries of evolution of how to do business. Centuries, even millennia, if you talk about prehistory when people were bartering, right? And a lot of these changes, they they either happen by accident or they happen progressively, but there's not many times in the history where people sat down and say, okay, let's just design the system. We have objectives, we have like, a scope, specifications, what we want the system to do. And based on these objectives, we're going to design it. We're going to design a system that encourages people to collaborate. That's why I call it collaborative system design. We want to design a system that encourages collaboration. And we are going to design the system in a collaborative way. So collaborative system design can be understood in two ways. That the end product is collaboration, but also the process is collaboration. So I said, okay, let's try to apply this methodology to redesign the economic system. So what are my objectives? What do I want the economic system to deliver? And what are the mechanisms, what are the principles and the mechanism that will allow me to deliver these objectives, right? So the general objective, I want businesses and people in general, when they work together with the economic element, it doesn't need to be a registered company, any kind of project that has some economic activity, to generate more wealth and to make sure that this wealth is distributed more fairly. Because poverty and income inequality are two main sources of conflicts and instability. We can see this in poor countries, in developed countries, where even though, people are super rich, but they're still poor people, and that creates frustration and instability and populism and so on. So that's kind of the main objectives, to create more wealth and to make sure that this wealth is distributed better. Now, how do we achieve this? Well, my gut feeling is collaboration is better than conflict. If people collaborate more, they will generate more wealth. And if they know that this wealth is going to be shared, that's an additional incentive to collaborate. So then how do you get people to collaborate? Right? And so another intuition, again, it's part of the reasoning, right? What is the objective? How do you get there? And then how do you get that? And how do you get that? So it's kind of a process thinking. So how do you get people to collaborate? Well, one of the mechanisms, it's not the only one, it's to align their financial interests. Now there's more ways, like you can have a great company culture where you have free snacks and nice music and some lounge where people can relax, and there's many ways to get people to collaborate and create a nice environment. But one very important one is alignment of financial interests. In fact, there's a lot of literature that says, incentives matter. People respond to incentives, financial incentives. It's not the only one, but it's a big part. And it's a part that people often don't see, especially when there's a conflict. Oh, we have a conflict, that means you're a bad person, I don't like you. But no, I don't understand what's going on. What's going on is that we have opposed financial interests. And therefore, what you're doing doesn't suit me, and vice versa. And most people, they judge other people, but they don't analyze the system that motivates those people, right? So one of the other, guiding philosophy of collaborative system design is don't judge the people, analyze the system, and try to understand what are the underlying mechanisms that drive behaviors, the incentives. Right. So I want to create more wealth, make it so that people share it better, encourage collaboration, align financial interests. So how do you align financial interests? When you have investors, founders, employees, suppliers, clients. In the current system, each of these groups have a standard way of doing business. If I'm an investor, I put money in the company, I get shares, and then I get dividends. If I'm an employee, I have a salary, I have a pay slip every month. Maybe I have a bonus based on my performance or the company performance. But all of these different stakeholder groups have different types of deals with different ways of being paid and different remuneration systems. So my intuition there was, if I want to align financial interests, I'm going to put everybody on the same remuneration system. And that introduces the principle of non-discrimination. There's no difference between a founder, an employee, a supplier, a client, an investor, and tomorrow a bank, a state, if they want to play along. They will probably be the last one to join the bandwagon, but hopefully at some stage we can have a single remuneration system that is the same for every stakeholder. And so if the company is making profit, everybody wins. If the company is going through a difficult period, everybody shares the pain, the effort, right? So you have a flexible cost structure where some of the costs are fixed, some of the costs are what we call flex. It depends on how much cash is available. If the company has enough cash to pay the flex after it paid the firm, then everybody gets a bit of flex. Everybody's shareholders, the employees, founder, everybody's getting the flex at the same time, on the same rate. And then the rest is invested in the company. So we create this kind of remuneration system where we say, I want to hire an employee, he's a really good employee, and I'm going to pay him, I don't know, 1,000 euros a month, or 10,000, depending which country you're in and which type of job he's doing. And but I don't have enough cash to pay him fully, so I'll pay him, 50% cash, 30% flex, and 20% in credit. That means he's investing this 200 euros a month, he's investing it in the business. When we make a profit and we are able to pay the firm and the flex, then we also, at the end of the year, will pay the credit that he has been investing over several years, and he also gets a piece of the profits. So it's kind of the same system to pay an employee, to pay a supplier,
right.
And for the investors. Everybody can use exactly the same mechanism.
Right, and they all depend on the same factors, like they all depend on the payment will depend on how well it's doing the company, so it doesn't depend, as you say, pay slips or dividends at the end of the financial year.
That's right. So there's two elements in your question. On the one hand, how much people are going to be paid is based on one indicator, which is the availability of cash.
Mm-hmm.
And we just look at cash. I need to have enough cash to pay my firm commitments, and then I pay my flex commitments, and then I can repay the credits and share the profits. We only look at cash. We don't look at accounting profits because that can be played around, and we don't look at operational metrics because every company has a different set of KPIs. You can, of course, link bonuses to KPIs, like operational KPIs, client satisfaction and how many tons you produce. And that can also go into the remuneration system. But then, so in the FlexUp system, in the traditional contract, you have an agreement on what you're going to do and how much I will pay you. And in the FlexUp system, you add a third question is, how do I pay you? Do I pay you? How do you split that payment between firm, flex, and credits? So the payment of the flex and the credit is based on the same indicator for all types of stakeholders. But then, of course, depending on what type of stakeholder you are, that payment of the flex or the credit can either be a bonus on your payslip if you're an employee, or a dividend if you're a shareholder, or an additional compensation if you're a supplier. So the technical implementation will be different for every type of stakeholder, and it could be very different in different types of countries with different tax implications. But that's what we call the technical implementation. But the FlexUp model is like a more abstract layer above, which is how do we split the cake? And then depending on, is this takeaway? Okay, we put your piece of the cake in a box. Are you eating here? Then we put it on the plate. So that's the technical implementation.
So FlexUp is a system that came to shake the current system.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that we want to shake the system. We're not operating against the system. We're not trying to break it. In fact, I'm not criticizing the current system. It's working. It's generating tremendous amount of wealth. It's bringing millions and billions of people out of poverty. But like anything, we can always improve, right? Any software has an update every few months where you have an upgrade and additional features. And sometimes you have a major upgrade, or sometimes you have a competing product that comes out of nowhere and people say, oh, this is actually nice, I'm going to switch to this other software, right? So that's how I think about, the classic economic system that we all operate in, and the FlexUp economic system, which is very innovative. So how do people respond? Well, first of all, they need more than 30 seconds to understand, because we're really very innovative in many fields. I mean, I've talked about the economic model, but we're also innovating a lot in the legal framework. How do we structure operations? We're developing a very interesting, very powerful business app, an ERP that lets you manage all of your business, your contracts, your orders, equity table, cash distribution, all of that can be managed from your mobile phone with a simple app, but very powerful. And then we have this ecosystem of partners that can help you, advise you, structure and develop your business. So we have this, what I call the 4 core pillars: the economic model, the legal framework, the business app, and the ecosystem. So it takes more than 30 seconds to explain what FlexUp is. And when people really, take the time to understand, generally they're like very amazed. They go like, wow, this is great. This is so innovative. And this is so obviously positive and beneficial, right? So the response is generally very positive. When I started to talk about FlexUp a few years ago, they would think, okay, I'm crazy. This is utopia. The guy is, he's dreaming. But now that we've actually built the platform, we have users, the app is working, the legal framework is quite already well, it's covering a lot of ground. People, they understand this is very powerful, very disruptive, very innovative. But of course, the question is, okay, how can I use it?
Right.
Is this the right time for me? Am I now starting a business and therefore I have some specific pain points that FlexUp really solves? Then, okay, I'm going to give you all my attention. You're going to explain me how FlexUp works. I need to understand the details now, because this is a big decision. I'm going to structure my company using the FlexUp system instead of the classic system. This is a big commitment. So before I make this big commitment, I need to understand. It takes a bit of time, and it takes a few hours to really understand, and a few weeks to think about it, sleep over it, and say, okay, I'm going to do it. So that's kind of the first challenge, is you need to find people at the right time in the development journey. And then you need to spend a lot of time explaining to them how it's going to work in practice. It's like, I want to build a house. Okay, then I'm going to spend a lot of time with my architect, and he's going to show me where the rooms are going to be. And then only when I have the full plan, then I say, okay, let's go do it. It's a little bit the same. So FlexUp, it's a bit like an architect. I'm going to show you a different way of designing and building your house.
Yes, I would describe it like that. I've got another question.
Oh no, I was absolutely always convinced that I was on the right, I wouldn't say on the right path, that I knew what my destination was. And then it's a matter of finding the right path to it. But the guiding objective is always the same. It's how to simplify and how to encourage collaboration. And people respond to incentives. We respond to the environment. If you put me in an environment where it's natural for me to do this, then I will do it. Why do people wear seat belts? Because every car has a seat belt, and if you don't put your seat belt on, the policeman will fine you. If there's no seat belt on the car and there's no obligation to put it, people won't use a seat belt. So it's not about changing the people, it's about creating the context where people will put their seatbelt. So you just need to understand what are the needs what are the problems, and then you design a solution that meets those needs and fixes those problems. So it's really a design challenge. It's a bit like somebody trying to build a product. You understand the problems that the consumers face, and you design the product that will respond to their need. And that's why I always come back to, collaborative system design. FlexUp is the product that I've been thinking and designing for more than 8 years now. And we've actually started really building the app and starting onboarding first users about a year ago. So yeah, it's a lot of time designing, and now we're building, we're deploying, and it's the time for us to scale. I mean, there's so many things in FlexUp that I can go on forever, and nobody has asked me all the questions. So there's always things that I haven't mentioned yet. I mean, one of the aspects of FlexUp is that, one of the principles is that part of your profit you should supposed to give back to the community. Like, you should allocate 5 or 10% of the excess cash at the end of the year to philanthropic activities, whether it's environmental impact, social impact, societal impact, because societal issues are important to provide stability. So these are kind of the 3 targets that we encourage companies to, give back to the community, to the environment, and I would say that's part of the DNA. That business, it's not about making profits for the shareholders and for the business owners. Business is about making the world a better place. Everybody should benefit. All the stakeholders that are part of the project should benefit. So that's why I say the stakeholders. It's founders, employees, suppliers, clients, investors. So the company should serve all of the stakeholders of the company, but should also serve and act for the greater society. The environment, poor people, whatever.
Doing business with purpose.
Well, I would say that FlexUp can be used for any business at any stage, even if you've not incorporated a company yet, or if this is just an informal project that you're doing with some friends, or you can use FlexUp for any type of business. FlexUp is very flexible, so you can apply it just for a small aspect of your business or for the whole business. It's free to start using it, and as you grow, then of course there is some subscription fee, but it's very affordable, and we're there to help you and to advise you, and if you can't pay us, then you can pay us in credit and we become your associate. So there's no reason not to use FlexUp. The only thing that you need to do is just spend a bit of time trying to understand what it is. That's the only thing that you need to do, and hopefully once you take the time to understand what FlexUp is, then hopefully you will see the benefits.
Let's not fear success.
Yes, exactly. We're there to help you.
Well, Fabrizio, thank you very much for this time, for this conversation. I liked it very much. I wanted to know more about the underneath FlexUp. So we both welcome everyone to look into and take a go.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Paula.